The title itself promised a story, but it didn't tell you about the laughter. It didn't tell you about Lily's giggle, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze, that always managed to chase away the shadows from Sarah's eyes. Sarah, a single dad, built his world around Lily. She was 10, bright as a button, and loved drawing more than anything. Her wheelchair was just another part of her, like her bright red hair or the way she always tilted her head when she was thinking. Their mornings were a carefully orchestrated dance. Sarah would wake up before dawn, making Lily's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes, always shaped like animals. Then, he'd gently wake her, careful not to startle her. Lily needed help getting ready, and Sarah was patient, always making it a game, turning brushing her teeth into a pirate adventure or getting dressed into a superhero transformation. He worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, which allowed him the flexibility to care for Lily. It wasn't easy. Money was tight, and some days felt like a marathon he wasn't sure he could finish. But Lily's smile was his fuel, her unwavering spirit his guiding star. Their apartment, though small, was filled with love and laughter. Lily's artwork adorned the walls, vibrant landscapes, whimsical creatures, and portraits of her dad, each one a testament to her boundless imagination. They had a little balcony overlooking the street, where they would often sit and watch the world go by. Lily loved to make up stories about the people they saw, imagining their lives and adventures. One of their favorite things to do was to take Lily's wheelchair to the park. It was a bit of a trek, but the park had a special swing designed for kids with disabilities. Lily would swing for hours, her laughter echoing through the trees. Sarah would sit beside her, watching her face light up with joy. Those moments were pure magic, a reminder of the simple pleasures in life. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in love and resilience. They faced every challenge together, hand in hand, or rather, hand on the push handles of Lily's wheelchair. Sarah was fiercely protective of Lily, always her advocate, her champion. He knew the world wasn't always kind to people with disabilities, and he was determined to make sure Lily knew her worth and that she was loved unconditionally. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and they cherished every moment. The apartment complex itself, Sunnyside Gardens, wasn't terrible. It was beige. Beige buildings, beige sidewalks, beige intentions, maybe. The landscaping crew came every Tuesday, mowing the lawns into perfect carpets of green and trimming the hedges into neat, squared-off soldiers. It was all very orderly. And Agnes, as HOA president, was the generalissimo of this beige army. The main gate to the complex was a source of frequent irritation for everyone, not just Sarah. It was supposed to be a security measure, but it was slow and clunky. Residents had to use a key fob to open it, and sometimes the sensor wouldn't work, causing traffic to back up onto the main street. Sarah had suggested several times that they install a more modern system, but Agnes always dismissed his suggestions, citing budget constraints or security concerns. The gate was particularly difficult for Lily. The entrance was narrow, and Sarah had to carefully maneuver her wheelchair to avoid scraping the sides. The timing was tricky too. The gate closed automatically after a few seconds, and if they weren't quick enough, it would start to swing shut. Sarah had complained about this to the HOA, suggesting a longer delay or a sensor that detected wheelchairs, but his concerns were ignored. Agnes had simply said, "Everyone has to follow the rules." He knew deep down that Agnes saw them as different. He'd caught her staring at Lily, her expression a mix of pity and disapproval. He'd even heard whispers from other residents, echoing Agnes's unspoken sentiments. It stung, but Sarah did his best to ignore it, focusing instead on Lily's happiness. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and Lily were returning from the park. Lily was tired but happy, humming a tune she'd made up about a friendly dragon. As they approached the gate, Sarah slowed down, preparing to navigate the narrow opening. A car was waiting behind them, its driver impatiently honking the horn. Sarah sighed. It was probably Agnes, late for her weekly bridge game. He just hoped she wouldn't cause any trouble. He was wrong. It was much worse than just trouble. The fob was still in Sarah's hand. He jabbed at the button repeatedly, willing the gate to open, but nothing happened. It was jammed solid, the metal groaning under the pressure. Lily was trapped, and Agnes was just sitting there, radiating disdain. Sarah dropped the fob and tried to manually force the gate open. He strained against the cold metal, his muscles screaming in protest, but it wouldn't budge. He could hear Lily sobbing softly behind him. "It's okay, sweetie," he said, his voice trembling. "Daddy's going to get you out." He looked back at Agnes, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. "Back up your car, now," he repeated, his voice louder this time. Agnes remained unmoved. "Honestly," she said, with a sigh that dripped with condescension, "you're making such a scene. Just pull her chair back. It's not that difficult." "Not that difficult?" Sarah repeated, incredulous. "She's pinned. She's in pain. And you're telling me it's not that difficult?" He gestured wildly at Lily, her face contorted in discomfort. "Look at her. Look what you've done." A few other residents, drawn by the commotion, began to gather at the edge of the parking lot. They watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern, their faces etched with apprehension. They knew Agnes, knew her reputation, and they knew that things were about to get ugly. One of them, Mrs. Henderson, a kindly old woman who lived in the apartment across from Sarah, cautiously approached. "Agnes," she said, her voice hesitant, "maybe you should back up. It looks like Lily is really hurt." Agnes shot her a dismissive glare. "Mind your own business, Martha," she snapped. "This is between me and, well, him." Sarah ignored them both, focusing all his energy on trying to free Lily. He grabbed the edge of the gate again, digging his fingers into the cold metal. He pulled with all his might, grunting with exertion, but the gate remained stubbornly fixed in place. He was starting to panic. Suddenly, he had an idea. He remembered seeing a small toolbox in the trunk of his car. He ran to the car, grabbed the toolbox, and rummaged through it until he found a crowbar. He raced back to the gate, his heart pounding in his chest. "Stand back, Lily," he said, his voice urgent. "Daddy's going to pry this thing open." He positioned the crowbar between the gate and the post, took a deep breath, and heaved. The metal screeched in protest, but it didn't budge. He tried again, putting all his weight into it. This time, with a loud crack, the gate finally gave way, creating just enough space to free Lily's wheelchair. Sarah quickly pulled Lily back, away from the gate. He knelt down beside her, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay, sweetie?" he asked, gently examining her leg. Lily was still crying, but her sobs were starting to subside. "It hurts, Daddy," she whimpered. "But I think it's okay." Sarah carefully lifted her leg and examined it. There was a red mark where the gate had pinned her, but it didn't appear to be broken. He breathed a sigh of relief. It could have been so much worse. He looked up at Agnes, his eyes filled with a cold fury. The game was about to change. He checked Lily over again, running his hands gently down her legs. "Does it still hurt a lot, sweetie?" Lily sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It stings," she said, "but it's getting better." Sarah kissed her forehead. "You're so brave," he whispered. He knew she was putting on a brave face for him. He wanted to scoop her up in his arms and carry her away from this place, away from Agnes, away from all the negativity. But he couldn't. He had to deal with this, for Lily's sake. He stood up, his gaze fixed on Agnes. She hadn't moved, hadn't even bothered to get out of her car. She just sat there, looking bored. The other residents were still watching, their faces a mixture of shock and disapproval. Mrs. Henderson was shaking her head sadly. Sarah took a step towards Agnes's car. "You could have seriously hurt my daughter," he said, his voice tight with anger. "You pinned her against that gate, and you didn't even care." You didn't even apologize. Agnes finally deigned to respond. Oh, please, she said, rolling her eyes. It was just a little bump. She's fine. A little bump? Sarah repeated, his voice rising. She's in a wheelchair, Agnes. She can't just walk it off. That gate could have crushed her leg. Well, maybe if you weren't so slow getting through the gate, it wouldn't have happened, Agnes retorted, her voice dripping with venom. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. He was trying so hard to remain calm, to be the bigger person, but Agnes was making it impossible. This isn't about me being slow, he said, his voice shaking with rage. This is about you being reckless and inconsiderate. This is about you not caring about the safety of others. I care about the rules, Agnes snapped back. And the rules say that everyone has to use the gate properly. You were holding up the line. So, the rules are more important than my daughter's safety? Sarah asked, his voice incredulous. Is that what you're saying? Agnes hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. The rules are the rules, she said stubbornly. That was it. Sarah had reached his breaking point. He couldn't reason with this woman. He couldn't make her understand the pain and fear she had caused. He knew that arguing with her any further would be pointless. But he also knew that he couldn't let her get away with this. He had to do something. He had to make her understand that her actions had consequences. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Then, he said the words that would change everything. You know, Agnes, he said, his voice suddenly calm and measured, I don't think you realize who you're talking to. Agnes raised an eyebrow, a look of mild curiosity on her face. Oh, she said. And who am I talking to? Sarah took another step closer to her car, his eyes fixed on hers. You're talking to the Assistant Commissioner for Disability Rights for the city of. He paused for dramatic effect. Oakhaven. The color drained from Agnes's face. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The gathered neighbors gasped, their eyes wide with disbelief. Agnes, usually so composed and self-assured, looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Sarah watched her, a grim satisfaction spreading through him. He hadn't planned on revealing his position, but Agnes's callousness had left him no choice. He knew this would change everything. Assistant Commissioner. Agnes finally stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But I didn't know. That's the problem, Agnes, Sarah said, his voice calm but firm. You didn't know. You didn't bother to ask. You just assumed that we were inconveniencing you, that Lily's disability was somehow a burden on your perfect little world. He saw a flicker of understanding in Agnes's eyes, a brief moment of clarity. But it quickly vanished, replaced by a look of defiance. Well, she said, her voice regaining some of its former steel, that doesn't give you the right to damage HOA property. You broke the gate. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Are you serious? He said, shaking his head in disbelief. You almost crushed my daughter, and you're worried about a broken gate? He gestured to Lily, who was still sitting in her wheelchair, looking frightened. Look at her, Agnes. Look at what you've done. Agnes glanced at Lily, then quickly looked away. I didn't mean to, she mumbled. I just wanted to get through the gate. You could have waited, Sarah said, his voice rising again. You could have been patient. You could have shown a little compassion. But you didn't. You chose to be impatient and rude, and now you're facing the consequences. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. He knew he couldn't let his anger get the best of him. He had a responsibility to Lily, and he had a responsibility to his position. He couldn't just lash out and make things worse. Agnes, he said, his voice calmer now, I'm not going to use my position to punish you. That's not what I'm about. But I am going to expect you to take responsibility for your actions. I'm going to expect you to apologize to my daughter. And I'm going to expect you to make sure that something like this never happens again. He paused, letting his words sink in. Do you understand? He asked. Agnes nodded slowly, her face pale and drawn. Yes, she said softly. I understand. But Sarah wasn't sure if she truly did. Only time would tell. He glanced at Lily, offering her a reassuring smile. He had a feeling this was just the beginning. The confrontation might be over, but the battle for understanding and acceptance had just begun. The moment hung heavy in the air. For a brief second, it seemed Agnes might actually apologize. But then, a stubborn set to her jaw, she spoke again, and any hope of contrition vanished. Apologize, she scoffed, her voice laced with disdain. I have nothing to apologize for. If you had taught your daughter to be more aware of her surroundings, this wouldn't have happened. Sarah stared at her, dumbfounded. He couldn't believe she was actually blaming Lily. Are you kidding me? He said, his voice rising again. She's 10 years old. And she's in a wheelchair. How much more aware can she be? Agnes shrugged, her face hardening. Maybe if you spent less time coddling her and more time teaching her to be independent, she wouldn't be so helpless, she said, her words like knives. The neighbors gasped. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had tried to mediate earlier, looked shocked and appalled. Sarah's face flushed with anger. He struggled to find the words to respond, but Agnes wasn't finished. And frankly, she continued, her voice dripping with venom, it's not fair to the rest of us to have to deal with that. This is a nice neighborhood, and we have standards to uphold. Your daughter's condition brings down the property values. Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness towards Lily. He wanted to shield her from Agnes's cruel words, to take her away from this toxic environment. But he knew he couldn't. He had to stand up to Agnes, not just for Lily, but for all people with disabilities who face discrimination and prejudice. How dare you, he said, his voice trembling with rage. How dare you say such hateful things about my daughter? She is a bright, beautiful, and amazing little girl, and she is worth more than everything in this entire neighborhood combined. He knelt down beside Lily, putting his arm around her. Don't listen to her, sweetie, he whispered. She doesn't know what she's talking about. You are perfect just the way you are. Lily clung to him, her body shaking with sobs. Sarah glared at Agnes, his eyes burning with fury. He had tried to be reasonable, he had tried to be understanding, but Agnes had pushed him too far. She had attacked his daughter, she had attacked his parenting, and she had attacked the very essence of who Lily was. He knew that he couldn't let her get away with this. He had to make her understand the consequences of her words and actions. He stood up, his jaw set, his eyes blazing. You know what, Agnes, he said, his voice dangerously low. I think it's time for you to learn a lesson. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I'm going to make a call, he said, his eyes fixed on Agnes's face. And I guarantee you, after this call, you're going to regret ever saying those things to my daughter. The color drained from Agnes's face again. She knew she had crossed a line, but she didn't know how far-reaching the consequences would be. She watched Sarah, her eyes wide with fear, as he dialed the number. He pressed the phone to his ear, waited for a moment, then spoke. Hello, he said, his voice cold and professional. This is Sarah Jenkins, Assistant Commissioner for Disability Rights. I'd like to report an incident of blatant discrimination and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. He paused, glancing at Agnes. And I think you'll find it quite interesting. The residents waited, holding their breath, for Lily's response. The air was thick with anticipation. All eyes were on the little girl in the wheelchair, her face etched with a mixture of pain, confusion, and a hint of something else, something that looked like understanding. Lily looked at Agnes, her gaze unwavering. Sarah held his breath, unsure what she would say. He knew that Lily was a kind and forgiving child, but he also knew that she had been deeply hurt by Agnes's words. He wouldn't blame her if she refused to accept the apology. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Lily spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying through the silence like a gentle breeze. "Do you really mean it?" she asked, her eyes searching Agnes's face. "Do you really promise to learn more about disabilities?" Agnes nodded fervently, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Lily," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I really mean it. I promise." Lily considered her words for a moment, then a small smile spread across her face. "Okay," she said. "I forgive you." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Even Sarah felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew that Lily's forgiveness was a gift, a generous act of grace that Agnes didn't necessarily deserve. But he also knew that it was a step in the right direction, a sign that healing was possible. Agnes rushed forward and knelt down beside Lily, taking her hand. "Thank you, Lily," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for forgiving me. I promise I won't let you down." Sarah watched them, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Agnes had a lot to learn, and she had a lot of work to do to regain the trust of the community. But he also believed that she was capable of change. He had seen a flicker of genuine remorse in her eyes, a spark of humanity that had been buried beneath layers of prejudice and ignorance. He hoped that spark would grow into a flame, illuminating a path towards understanding and acceptance. He helped Lily adjust in her wheelchair and stood up, offering Agnes a tentative smile. "Thank you, Agnes," he said. "I appreciate your apology. I hope you'll keep your promise." Agnes nodded, her face still etched with shame and regret. "I will," she said. "I promise." Sarah took Lily's hand and began to will her towards their apartment. As they moved away from the gate, he glanced back at Agnes. She was still kneeling on the ground, her head bowed in shame. The other residents were slowly approaching her, offering words of comfort and support. It was clear that she had a long way to go to earn back their trust, but she wasn't alone. She had a community willing to help her on her journey. And that, Sarah realized, was a victory in itself. He looked in on Lily, sleeping soundly, her unicorn blanket pulled up to her chin. He kissed her forehead, a silent promise to protect her from the world, even when the world was a beige apartment complex ruled by a Karen. He knew Agnes's words had stung, even if Lily didn't fully grasp their meaning. He just hoped the little girl's inherent goodness wouldn't be chipped away by the Agneses of the world. The next morning, Sarah decided to test the waters. He needed to see if Agnes's apology was more than just empty words. He decided to take Lily for a walk around the complex, something they hadn't done much of lately, precisely to avoid Agnes. As they rounded the corner near the swimming pool, they saw Agnes. She was watering the flower beds, her usual stern expression softened, almost nervous. She saw them and her eyes widened slightly. "Good morning, Sarah," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Good morning, Lily." Lily, clutching her stuffed dragon, hid slightly behind Sarah's leg. Sarah gave her a reassuring squeeze. "Good morning, Agnes," Sarah replied, his voice neutral. Agnes hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "Lily," she said, her voice soft, I wanted to show you something." She pointed to a newly planted flower bed, filled with bright, colorful blooms. "I planted these just for you," she said. "I know you like flowers, and I thought they would brighten up your day." Lily peeked out from behind Sarah's leg, her eyes widening with curiosity. She loved flowers, especially colorful ones. She slowly wheeled her chair closer to the flower bed, her face lighting up with a smile. "They're pretty," she said, her voice shy. Agnes smiled back, her face radiating genuine warmth. "I'm glad you like them," she said. "I'm going to plant some more, too." Maybe we can even plant some together, if you want. Lily's smile widened. Really? She asked. Really, Agnes said. Sarah watched them, his heart swelling with a mixture of hope and relief. Maybe, just maybe, Agnes was truly trying to change. Maybe this wasn't just a performance. Maybe she was finally starting to see Lily, not as a burden or an inconvenience, but as a person, a bright and beautiful little girl who deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. But then, Agnes spoke again, and Sarah's hope faltered. Of course, Agnes said, her voice turning slightly sharp, we'll have to make sure the flowers don't attract any unwanted pests. We wouldn't want anything to ruin the landscaping. Sarah's smile faded. He knew what she meant. She was talking about squirrels, or rabbits, or maybe even children. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. He wasn't sure if Agnes was aware of what she was implying, or if it was just a Freudian slip. But either way, it was a reminder that she still had a long way to go. We'll make sure the flowers are well protected, Agnes, Sarah said, his voice tight. But we'll also make sure that everyone feels welcome in this community, regardless of their condition. Agnes's face flushed slightly. Of course, she said quickly. That's what I meant. I just want everything to be nice. Sarah nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on hers. He knew that Agnes was trying, but she was still struggling to overcome her prejudices and biases. It was going to be a long and difficult process, and he wasn't sure if she was truly up to the task. But for Lily's sake, he had to hope that she was. He had to hope that Agnes could change, not just for herself, but for the entire community. He had to hope that Sunnyside Gardens could become a place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. And he had to hope that Lily could grow up in a world where people like Agnes were the exception, not the rule. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He replayed the conversation with Agnes in his head, searching for any sign of insincerity, any hint that she was just trying to appease him. He knew that Agnes was a complex person, capable of both great kindness and great cruelty. He just wasn't sure which side of her he would be dealing with in the coming weeks and months. He thought about Lily, sleeping soundly in the next room. He thought about her bright smile, her infectious laughter, and her unwavering spirit. He knew that he had to do everything in his power to protect her, to make sure that she grew up in a world where she felt safe, loved, and accepted. He also knew that he couldn't do it alone. He needed the help of his community, even the help of people like Agnes. He drifted off to sleep, his mind filled with thoughts of disability awareness workshops, accessibility audits, and community meetings. He knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but he was determined to stay the course. He was determined to make Sunnyside Gardens a better place, not just for Lily, but for everyone. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He made Lily her favorite blueberry pancakes, shaped like unicorns, and they ate breakfast together on the balcony, overlooking the neatly manicured lawns of Sunnyside Gardens. "Daddy," Lily said, her mouth full of pancake, "are you going to talk to Agnes again today?" Sarah smiled. "Yes, sweetie," he said. "I am. We're going to work together to make Sunnyside Gardens a better place for everyone." Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" she asked. "Even for people in wheelchairs?" "Especially for people in wheelchairs," Sarah said, winking at her. Lily giggled, a sound that always managed to chase away the shadows from Sarah's eyes. "That's good," she said. "Because I really like living here. I just wish the gate wasn't so hard to get through." Sarah's heart ached. He knew that the gate was just one of many challenges that Lily faced on a daily basis. But he was determined to make things better, one step at a time. After breakfast, Sarah went to the HOA office, determined to start the process of change. He found Agnes sitting at her desk, looking flustered and overwhelmed. She was surrounded by stacks of paperwork, and she had a harried expression on her face. "Good morning, Agnes," Sarah said, his voice cheerful. Are you ready to get started? Agnes looked up, her eyes widening slightly. Oh, Sarah, she said, her voice relieved. I'm so glad you're here. I have no idea where to begin. Sarah smiled. He knew that Agnes was out of her depth, but he was confident that he could help her navigate the process. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. Don't worry, Agnes, he said. We'll take it one step at a time. First, let's talk about the disability awareness workshops. And so, the process of change began. It was slow, and it was often frustrating. But with each small step forward, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew that he couldn't change the world overnight, but he could make a difference, one community at a time. And he knew that with Lily by his side, he could face any challenge, no matter how difficult. He spent hours working with Agnes, planning the workshops, swollen with tears. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm terrified. I know everyone hates me. Sarah reached out and gently touched her arm. That's not true, Agnes, he said. People are angry, yes. But they don't hate you. They just want to be heard. And they want to see change. He paused, taking a deep breath. Agnes, he continued, I know you've made mistakes. But it's not too late to make things right. You can use this meeting as an opportunity to apologize, to acknowledge the pain you've caused, and to commit to doing better. You can show people that you're truly willing to change. Agnes looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Do you really think so? She asked, her voice filled with doubt. I do, Sarah said, his voice firm. But it's up to you. You have to be sincere. You have to be willing to listen to what people have to say, even if it's hard to hear. And you have to be willing to take action to address their concerns. He squeezed her arm gently. I'm here for you, Agnes, he said. I'll help you through this. But you have to be willing to help yourself. Agnes nodded slowly, her face etched with determination. Okay, Sarah, she said. I'll try. I promise. Just then, the meeting was called to order. The community center was packed, every seat filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, a mixture of anger, frustration, and hope. Agnes took her place at the head table, her face pale but resolute. She looked out at the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Good evening, everyone, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I know that many of you are angry, and I understand why. I have made mistakes, and I have hurt people. And for that, I am deeply sorry. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. I want you to know that I am committed to doing better, she continued. I am committed to listening to your concerns, to addressing your grievances, and to making Sunnyside Gardens a more inclusive and welcoming community for everyone. She went on to outline her plans for disability awareness workshops, accessibility audits, and other initiatives to improve the community. She acknowledged the HOA's financial mismanagement and promised to implement greater transparency and accountability. She even announced that she would be stepping down as president, to allow for fresh leadership and a new perspective. The room was silent as Agnes spoke, everyone listening intently to her words. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a spontaneous round of applause. Sarah watched Agnes, his heart swelling with pride. He knew that she still had a long way to go, but she had taken the first step. She had acknowledged her mistakes, she had apologized for her actions, and she had committed to making change. And in that moment, she had transformed herself from a Karen into a leader, a champion of her community, and a symbol of hope for a better future. The Beige Army was officially disbanded. And the rainbow was shining brighter than ever before. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Agnes, true to her word, threw herself into the task of transforming Sunnyside Gardens. She organized disability awareness workshops, brought in experts to conduct accessibility audits, and worked tirelessly to address the concerns of the residents. Sarah, along with other members of the community, played an active role in the process. They shared their experiences, offered suggestions, and helped to implement the changes. They also made sure that Agnes remained accountable to her promises, holding her to a high standard of transparency and integrity. The transformation wasn't easy. There were setbacks and challenges along the way. Some residents resisted the changes, clinging to their old prejudices and biases. Others questioned the cost of the accessibility improvements, arguing that it was unfair to burden homeowners with additional expenses. But Sarah and Agnes, working together, persevered. They addressed the concerns of the skeptics, explained the benefits of inclusivity, and found creative solutions to the challenges. They also emphasized the importance of community, reminding everyone that Sunnyside Gardens was only as strong as its weakest member. Slowly but surely, the community began to change. Residents started to treat each other with more respect and compassion. They learned to communicate effectively with people with disabilities. They embraced the diversity of their community and celebrated the unique talents and perspectives that each member brought to the table. The accessibility improvements also made a significant difference in the lives of many residents. The gate was fixed, with a new sensor that detected wheelchairs and prevented it from closing too quickly. Ramps were installed at the entrances to the buildings, making it easier for people with mobility impairments to get around. Accessible parking spaces were added, and the swimming pool was equipped with a lift. Lily, in particular, benefited from the changes. She was able to move around the community more easily, and she felt more included and accepted. She also developed a close friendship with Agnes, who became a mentor and a role model for her. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and Lily were walking through Sunnyside Gardens, admiring the changes that had been made. Lily was laughing and chatting, her face radiant with joy. Sarah watched her, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "Daddy," Lily said, stopping to admire a bed of flowers, "I really like living here now. Everyone is so nice." Sarah smiled and squeezed her hand. "Yes, sweetie," he said. "It is. And it's all thanks to you. You showed everyone that it's important to be kind and to accept people for who they are." Lily beamed with pride. "I'm glad," she said. "I want everyone to be happy." As they continued their walk, they saw Agnes planting flowers in a new accessible garden, designed specifically for residents with disabilities. She waved to them, her face radiant with a genuine smile. "Hi, Sarah." "Hi, Lily," she called out. "Come and see what I'm doing." Sarah and Lily approached the garden, and Agnes showed them the different types of flowers she was planting, explaining how they were chosen for their vibrant colors and fragrant scents. "I wanted to create a garden that everyone could enjoy, no matter their abilities," she said, her voice filled with pride. "And I wanted to make sure that it was accessible to people in wheelchairs, so they could get up close and personal with the flowers." Lily reached out and gently touched a bright red rose, her face lighting up with joy. "It's beautiful, Agnes," she said. "Thank you." Agnes smiled warmly. "You're welcome, Lily," she said. "It's my pleasure." Sarah watched them, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had come to Sunnyside Gardens seeking a safe and welcoming home for his daughter, and he had found so much more. He had found a community that was willing to learn, to grow, and to embrace change. And he had found a friend in the most unlikely of places. He knew that the journey was far from over. There would still be challenges and setbacks along the way. But he also knew that they were on the right path, and that together, they could overcome any obstacle. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Sunnyside Gardens, Sarah, Lily, and Agnes stood together in the accessible garden, admiring the beauty of the flowers and the strength of their community. They had all come a long way, and they had all learned a valuable lesson, that even the most unlikely of people can change, and that even the most challenging of situations can be transformed into something beautiful. The Karen had become a friend, the Beige Army had become a rainbow, and Sunnyside Gardens had become a true home for everyone. And it all started with a little girl in a wheelchair, a single dad who loved her unconditionally, and a gate that closed just a little too quickly. The end, or perhaps, just the beginning. That wasn't quite the end, though. The accessible garden became a symbol of Sunnyside Gardens' transformation, a place where residents of all abilities could gather, connect, and celebrate their shared humanity. It was more than just a garden, it was a testament to the power of empathy, understanding, and community. Agnes, no longer the HOA president, became a passionate advocate for disability rights. She volunteered at a local disability center, sharing her story and inspiring others to overcome their prejudices. She also became a mentor to Lily, encouraging her artistic talents and helping her to navigate the challenges of living with a disability. Sarah continued to serve as assistant commissioner, using his position to promote inclusivity and accessibility throughout the city. He often spoke about his experiences in Sunnyside Gardens, using it as an example of how communities can transform themselves through education, collaboration, and a willingness to embrace change. Lily thrived in her new environment. She excelled in school, made new friends, and continued to create her vibrant and imaginative artwork. She also became a vocal advocate for disability rights, speaking at community events and inspiring others with her courage and her optimism. The gate, once a symbol of division and exclusion, became a symbol of welcome and inclusion. It stood open wide, inviting everyone to enter and experience the warmth and acceptance of Sunnyside Gardens. 1 year after the incident at the gate, Sarah, Lily, and Agnes stood together at the community center, celebrating the anniversary of their transformation. The room was filled with residents, all smiling and laughing, their faces reflecting the joy and unity that had come to define their community. Sarah looked around the room, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had come to Sunnyside Gardens seeking a safe and welcoming home for his daughter, and he had found so much more. He had found a community that was willing to learn, to grow, and to embrace change. He had found a friend in the most unlikely of places. And he had found peace and acceptance in his own heart. He raised his glass.